My parents left for Italy with my brother after my crash. Don't call us while we're in Rome. Have you ever realized you were just a convenience, not a priority? In the family, you've spent your whole life trying to hold together. I did, but I didn't see it until I was flat on my back in a hospital bed with glass in my hair and 3 broken ribs, while I was still under anesthesia. They had already boarded the plane for Florence. They didn't wait. They didn't check. They just left. And the most ironic part, I planned the entire trip. My name is Sabrina Carpenter. I'm 29 years old. I live in Seattle, and I work as a UX designer for a mid-sized fintech startup. It's the kind of job that sounds cooler than it is. Full of deadlines, Figma files, and endless client feedback loops. But I liked it. I liked building things quietly, precisely, in the background. I never needed to be the face of anything. I just wanted to be useful. And that's exactly what my parents took advantage of. I was the useful daughter, not the favorite, not the fun one, just the one who made things happen, while my younger brother Ethan was the creative spirit of the family, always trying something new, always being supported through every failure. I was the scaffolding, the one who never needed help, so never got any. I lived in a modest apartment near Pike Place. My parents lived about 40 minutes out in Redmond. Ethan had moved back in with them after pausing his film production dreams. That pause had lasted 3 years. In those 3 years, I had helped pay off one of Ethan's credit card bills, contributed to Mom's dental surgery, and co-signed on the family car that Ethan drove more than anyone. I didn't say no, because no had consequences. No meant guilt, shame, distance. So I said yes, again and again, until I stopped noticing how much of myself was eroding. But then came Florence. I hadn't taken a real vacation in years. Italy was Mom's dream. She used to talk about it when I was little, walking through the Uffizi Gallery, drinking espresso in some quiet piazza, seeing Botticelli's Venus in person. I thought maybe, just maybe, if I could give her that dream, she might finally see me as something more than a problem solver. So I spent months planning it. I booked flights with my airline miles. I made restaurant reservations. I organized tours, prepaid entry tickets, even arranged for a gluten-free cooking class for Ethan's sensitive stomach. It was, as my coworker joked, the kind of itinerary that travel agents would envy. But I didn't mind. It gave me a sense of purpose, a fragile kind of hope. The day of the accident started like any other, rainy and overbooked. I had agreed to pick up Ethan's tailored blazer from downtown before heading into a product demo, the jacket he forgot to pick up for his trip. I left the shop with the garment bag slung over my shoulder, juggling my phone, a coffee, and the bag like some kind of unpaid assistant. I never saw the van that ran the red light, just a horn, a flash of metal, and then nothing. I woke up hours later in the trauma ward. My side was bandaged, my shoulder dislocated. The nurse told me I was lucky to be alive, but I didn't feel lucky. I felt discarded, abandoned, unseen. The nurse said my family had been contacted, that they'd been informed. I waited for them to show up. I watched the door. Nothing. Hours passed. Then a text came. From Mom. It read, "Sabrina, honey." We talked it over and decided to still go. Everything's non-refundable. And your dad needs this break. Ethan's already at the gate. We'll send photos. Please don't worry. We'll toast to your recovery. I stared at the screen for so long, I forgot how to blink. That was the moment. That was when something broke in me, not physically, but deeper. They had gone. They hadn't even come to see me. And they were using the vacation I had gifted them to celebrate my absence. I closed my eyes and let the silence swallow me. That silence, oddly enough, felt more honest than any family dinner we'd ever had. They went to Florence. I stayed in the ICU, alone, and in that quiet. I began to remember things I had chosen to forget, like how often I was expected to clean up messes I never made, or how quickly love was withdrawn the moment I asked for anything. That's the thing about being the responsible one. You get used to being invisible until one day you're erased so thoroughly it almost feels like relief. That night, staring at the blank ceiling tiles above me, I realized something terrifying and true. If I didn't choose myself now, no one ever would. I didn't sleep much the first night in the hospital, between the ache in my ribs and the sterile hum of machines. I lay still and silent, replaying everything. The packed Florence itinerary was still saved on my phone. The wine tasting for Dad's birthday, the museum tour I knew Mom would love, the rooftop dinner that was meant to be our first real family night in years. I had built it like I always did, quietly, perfectly, hoping it would hold us together, but it didn't. It became the proof that I was just the scaffolding, necessary, but never noticed. The next morning, my roommate from college, Eliza, called. She'd seen a cryptic post my mom had made about sending love and prayers to our daughter from Florence. The way she said the city's name made something tighten in my chest. "Wait," she asked. "They're in Italy without you." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Silence was confirmation enough. She didn't say much after that, just paused for a beat and whispered, "Jesus, Sabrina," like she couldn't believe it either. Eliza lived in Chicago now. We hadn't spoken in over a year, but that call. It reminded me what real care sounds like. It reminded me how long it had been since I was seen by someone who didn't need me for something. That afternoon, I asked a nurse to help me find my phone charger. I opened my laptop, loaded the shared travel documents folder, and started canceling everything. First, the cooking class, then the tour of Bubbly Gardens. The confirmation numbers disappeared one by one, like watching dominoes fall in reverse. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't even feel angry. I just felt done. The return flights were the last thing I touched. I stared at them for a long time, imagining the moment my parents and Ethan would reach the airport and find their reservations gone. Maybe they'd think it was a glitch. Maybe they'd call the airline. But eventually, they would realize what had happened, and for once, they would have to figure something out without me. That thought, that single shift of burden, was the first breath of real air I'd taken in years. 3 days passed before my phone began to ring. My mom's name lit up the screen first, then Dad's, then Ethan. The messages started innocent. "We're having a hard time checking into the hotel." "Hey, sweetie, did something happen with the bookings?" Then came the sharper ones. "You need to fix this. We're stuck. Sabrina, this is immature." I let the calls pile up like laundry I refused to wash. On the 4th day, Ethan left a voicemail. His voice had that familiar edge entitlement wrapped in false exhaustion. "You seriously left us out here. I hope you're proud. Mom's crying. Dad's furious. You just left your family stranded." I deleted it before it ended. What struck me wasn't the audacity. It was the consistency. Even now, even from an ocean away, they still expected me to fix what they had broken. By the end of the week, the calls slowed down. The silence that followed was thick but not heavy. It felt earned, necessary. I was released from the hospital 7 days after the crash. My left arm still stiff, my ribs still sore, but I was walking, breathing, free. My apartment had been untouched, no welcome note, no flowers, just quiet, for the first time. I didn't hate it. I made myself tea and sat on the floor with my laptop, staring out the window. Rain tapped the glass like a metronome, steady and unbothered. I opened an old folder titled Someday from my desktop saved itineraries, places I'd dreamed of, notes I'd written and forgotten. One stuck out: Santorini 2020. I smiled. That year I had spent the money on Ethan's new camera instead. He used it for 3 weeks before pawning it to pay rent. That night, I wrote a short email to HR. I asked for an extra week off. No reason given. Just a simple request. The next day, my manager replied, "Take what you need. We've got you." I stared at that line longer than I expected. We've got you. I didn't realize how much I needed someone to say that, even in a corporate font. The next few days were quiet but strange. I moved slowly. I thought carefully. I unfollowed my mother on Facebook. I muted Ethan's number. I started physical therapy at a nearby clinic. The therapist, Mara, was gentle but firm. She asked what happened. I said, "Car accident." She nodded. "You're lucky to be alive." I almost told her the whole story. But then I realized the fact that I survived the crash wasn't the real miracle. The miracle was that I survived my family, that I walked away and didn't look back. It wasn't revenge. Not really. It was reclamation, piece by piece. And the strangest part, the quieter it got, the more whole I began to feel. 3 days after I got home, someone knocked on my door. It wasn't my parents. It wasn't Ethan. It was Josh from Product. We weren't close, mostly Slack messages about UI bugs and the occasional shared coffee in the break room. But there he was, holding a paper bag that smelled like real food and not hospital starch. "Thought you could use something better than instant noodles," he said, not asking to come in, just offering warmth at the threshold. I didn't cry. I just stepped aside and let the food do what words couldn't. The next day, it was Amelia from QA with fresh bread. Then Priya brought soup by the end of the week. My fridge looked like a curated meal plan. But more than that, it looked like proof that I wasn't invisible. Not to everyone. The people who showed up weren't flashy. They weren't dramatic. They just came, left something kind, and left again. It was simple and real. My parents, on the other hand, had gone quiet, not silent, just strategic. I noticed the shift in their tone when the texts resumed. Shorter, more calculated. "Hope you're feeling better. We're back. When's a good time to talk?" They weren't asking because they missed me. They were checking the temperature, seeing if the ground was safe to step on again. I didn't reply. I didn't block them either. I wanted the record. Each message was like a receipt of who they really were. That's something no apology could undo. Then came the Facebook post, a long paragraph on my mother's wall, filled with phrases like deep heartbreak, ungrateful, and we tried our best. There was no mention of the hospital, no mention of Ethan using my itinerary, just sadness, just martyrdom. Comments rolled in from extended family and distant church friends, all the usual lines, praying for reconciliation. Kids these days, stay strong. Naomi, I didn't respond, but my cousin Clara did. She had visited me in the hospital, brought a crossword puzzle book and a ginger ale. Her comment was short. "You left your daughter in a trauma ward to drink wine in Italy with Ethan. That's not heartbreak. That's neglect." Then another cousin chimed in, and another. Screenshots were sent around. The post disappeared by morning, but the damage had already found its audience. For once, I wasn't the one cleaning up the mess that week. I went back to the Florence folder, not to cancel, but to remember, to reclaim. I looked at the photos of the hotel, the vineyard, the art walk, and for the first time, I imagined doing them alone, not as an act of defiance, not to prove anything, just as a way of saying, I'm still allowed to want beauty, even if no one else was ever willing to share it. Physical therapy was slow. Each step made my ribs ache, but there was pride in the pain. Each inch I stood straighter. I felt something shift inside me, not just bone, but belief. For years, I thought strength meant carrying everything. Now I realized it could mean letting go of expectations, of stories that were never mine, of people who only showed up when they needed fixing. By the end of the second week, I could walk the length of my apartment without help. I stood in front of the mirror and didn't flinch at the bruises. They were fading, not just the ones on my skin. On Sunday night, I received an email. Subject line, "Can we start over?" It was from Ethan, 5 paragraphs. He talked about stress, about pressure, about being misunderstood. He never said the words, "I'm sorry." He just asked if we could meet sometime soon. I stared at the message, read it twice, then closed the tab. Not everything deserves a response. Some things are meant to be left unanswered so they don't get rewritten, because silence, when chosen, is power. I went to sleep that night with my phone on airplane mode, not out of spite, out of peace, and for the first time in years, I didn't dream about fixing anything. I dreamed of Italy, but this time, I was the only one there. It happened on a Tuesday. I was in the middle of practicing a stair step at physical therapy when I got the text from Eliza. "Are you okay with me posting this?" Attached was a screenshot, my mom's new Facebook post. This time, it was less poetic, more pointed. Some daughters don't understand sacrifice. We tried, we gave, we supported, and still, we were punished, publicly, shamefully. Family should be forever, not conditional. My fingers went cold, but not from surprise. I'd been waiting for this. The moment they would stop pretending and start performing, I told Eliza, "Go ahead." She didn't post it herself. She didn't need to. All she did was comment under the post, "You left your daughter in a hospital bed after a car accident and took her brother to Florence on her dime. If that's your idea of unconditional love, maybe rethink the definition." Then came the wave. People I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly had a memory to share. Sabrina helped pay my tuition when our scholarship got delayed. She showed up to my father's funeral when no one else did. She drove 4 hours to bring me a charger before my bar exam. No one had asked them to speak. They just did. Truth has a strange way of finding daylight when you least expect it. By that Friday, the original post was gone, but screenshots lived on. The cousins' group chat lit up. Ethan left quietly. My mom stayed silent. My dad sent me a single-word message. Unnecessary. I didn't reply. It wasn't. It was overdue. For years, they had told their version of our family story. I was the difficult one, the rigid one, the ungrateful one. But now, the curtain had been pulled back, and all I did was stand still. That weekend, I sat on my balcony with my laptop and booked a flight to Florence. 1 seat, 1 name, no detour. The confirmation ping felt like reclaiming something, not revenge, not a redo, just space, honest space that belonged to me. I booked the same hotel, same room. Even, I reread the menu for the rooftop restaurant and smiled at the pasta dish I'd once reserved for Dad. Now it was just for me. Every choice was intentional. No compromise. No secret agenda to earn love. Just me, honoring what I once thought needed to be shared in order to have value. Back at work, things were quiet, but different. Colleagues checked in without asking too much. Amelia from QA left a tiny cactus on my desk with a post-it. "You're still standing. So is this guy. You're both stronger than you look." The sentiment made me smile. I didn't need grand gestures. I just needed to know I wasn't crazy for expecting decency. On the day I finally walked the full office hallway without holding the wall, Josh from product clapped softly and said, "Look who's back." I nodded, half back, but even saying that felt good. I wasn't pretending to be invincible anymore. I was healing, honestly, slowly, but healing all the same. That night, I sat on my living room floor, surrounded by travel guides I had once bought for the family trip. I opened one and wrote my name on the inside cover. Not for the Carpenters, not family notes. Just me, for once. That was enough. The trip was still weeks away, but I started making a list. Not of to-dos, not reservations. Just things I wanted to feel. Stillness, solitude, joy without responsibility. It felt strange writing them down, like I had to relearn that wanting things for myself wasn't selfish. It was survival. I didn't tell anyone about the trip at first, not because I was hiding it, because it didn't require permission. I had spent a lifetime asking for approval I never received. Now I was practicing something new, living out loud without waiting for applause, and beneath it all, one question echoed clearer each day: if they truly loved me. Why did it take losing access to my labor for them to notice my absence 1 week before my flight? I came home to find an envelope wedged beneath my apartment door. No return address, just my full name written in tight, deliberate handwriting that I recognized immediately. It was my mother's. For a long moment, I just stood there, staring at it like it might burn through my skin. Then I picked it up, took it inside, and let it sit unopened on the kitchen counter while I made tea. When I finally slid my finger through the seal, I wasn't expecting honesty or apology. I was right. The letter was 5 pages long, handwritten in blue ink, as if neat cursive could make the contents softer. She began with an old trick false warmth, hoping I was feeling better, wishing things hadn't escalated. Then it turned. She was hurt by how I'd misrepresented the truth, by how I'd let outsiders attack the family online. She called my silence cruel. She said I had always been the strong one, and therefore didn't need as much support. And then, in a sentence I read 3 times just to make sure I wasn't imagining it, she wrote, "Your accident was unfortunate, but it came at a difficult time for all of us emotionally." That line stayed in my mouth like something rotten. I folded the letter carefully, slid it back into the envelope, and tucked it in the drawer where I kept expired warranties and batteries that probably didn't work. It belonged with things that used to be useful but no longer held charge. The next morning, Ethan texted again. "Hey, things got messy, but Mom isn't doing great. Thought you should know. No apology, no acknowledgement, just an expectation. A trap dressed up like a check-in." I didn't reply. He followed up hours later with a voice message. I didn't listen. I just watched the waveform dance and disappear. My silence was no longer passive. It was a boundary. That weekend, I packed for Florence, not just clothes, but choices. I picked outfits that made me feel like myself, not the daughter version I'd shrunk into, the jeans my mom once called too edgy, the linen shirt my dad said looked a little much. I packed them anyway, because this trip wasn't about who they wanted me to be. It was about remembering who I was before I learned to shrink. On the flight, I didn't speak to anyone. I watched the clouds turn gold over the Atlantic and let the quiet fill the space where anxiety used to live. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't angry. I was empty in a way that finally felt clean. The plane landed just after dawn. Florence was bathed in soft morning light. The streets just beginning to wake. The air smelled like stone and citrus and something old and steady. A driver stood at arrivals, holding a card with my name. Ms. Sabrina Carpenter. No one had ever addressed me like that in person, not as a child, not even as an adult. It felt formal, respectful, like I was being met for who I actually was. The hotel was exactly as I remembered from the booking photos. Ivy crawling up the walls, a quiet courtyard tucked behind wrought iron gates. The concierge handed me the key with a soft benvenuta and asked if I needed help with anything. I said no, because for the first time in a long time, I didn't need anyone to carry anything for me. The room was small and beautiful. A narrow balcony overlooked cobblestone streets where scooters hummed and church bells rang every hour. I sat in the window with a glass of sparkling water and didn't take a photo. I wasn't performing. I was just living. The next few days passed without effort. I visited the museum I once scheduled for my mother, stood in front of Botticelli's Venus, and let myself feel nothing. No awe, no sadness, no longing to share it, just stillness. I took the cheese tasting tour I had once planned for Ethan and didn't pretend to enjoy the goat varieties just because someone else would have liked them. I ordered wine without explaining the notes. I stayed out late. I slept in. I wrote nothing down every night. I returned to that same room and sat with myself. I didn't process. I didn't rehearse future conversations. I just let things be. There was power in the boredom. Power in not fixing, not proving, not doing anything for anyone else. On the third evening, I passed a vendor selling leather journals. I stopped, picked one up, and flipped through the pages. They were blank and soft and smelled like ink and old decisions. I bought one. Back in the room, I opened it and wrote a single sentence. I am not responsible for the silence they created when they walked away. I closed the book. I didn't need to write more that night. The story was already happening. Not because I was fighting them, but because I wasn't anymore. I thought the silence meant they had finally let go, that after the public unraveling and the unanswered messages, they had chosen to retreat, regroup, and carry on with the version of the story that made them feel better. I didn't expect them to resurface, not in Florence, but they did. It was my last full day there, and I had just come back from a walk along the Arno. My shoulders were loose for the first time in months, my chest finally rising without that invisible weight pressing down. I had lunch alone at a small cafe near Piazza Santo Spirito and was halfway through a bowl of cacio e pepe when the hotel receptionist called my room. Her voice was hesitant. "Signorina Carpenter, there are 3 people in the lobby asking to speak with you. They say they are your family." I didn't answer right away. I just stared at the receiver, trying to process whether this was a joke or some strange coincidence. It wasn't. When I came downstairs, I saw them before they saw me. My mother in travel-wrinkled linen, holding her purse tight like a weapon. My father standing stiff behind her, looking anywhere but at the front desk. And Ethan, arms crossed, sunglasses on indoors, like this was just another minor inconvenience in a life that always bent itself to accommodate him. When she saw me, my mother smiled, not an apologetic smile, not even a nervous one. It was the same smile she used to wear when she entered church and needed everyone to believe everything was fine. "Sabrina," she said brightly, as if we were meeting for brunch, "we thought we might catch you before your flight." I didn't speak. I simply waited. My father cleared his throat, glanced toward the concierge, then back at me. "We'd like to talk. In private." I shook my head once. No. It wasn't a dramatic moment. There was no trembling, no raised voice, just that word, clean, final. My mother's smile faltered. We came all this way. I shrugged. So did I. She looked offended, as if I'd slammed a door in her face instead of answering one they should never have knocked on. Ethan scoffed. You're really doing this here in front of strangers. That part made me laugh. Quietly. You left me in a hospital bed to go drink wine on a trip I paid for. Ethan, I think we're past worrying about appearances. His face shifted. He didn't expect me to say it aloud. My mother stepped in quickly, smoothing her voice. We made a mistake, but we were under a lot of pressure. You don't understand what we were dealing with at the time. She wanted to reframe it. She wanted me to play along, but I didn't owe them the comfort of that lie anymore. No, I said, steady. I understand exactly what happened. You made a choice, and now I'm making one too. My father spoke then, for the first time since they'd arrived. You're being unfair. We raised you. We gave you everything. That line, that old, recycled phrase they always used when control started to slip. I let it hang in the air. Then I replied, no, I gave everything. You just took. I turned back to the desk and nodded to the receptionist. They'll be leaving now. The woman blinked, then nodded back. Of course, Signorina, as security approached gentle, professional, but firm. My mother called after me. This isn't how family works. Sabrina, I didn't look back. Exactly. I said, and I meant it. Back in my room. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just stood still and looked out at the rooftops below. I had once imagined that view with them beside me. I had imagined laughter, shared plates, warmth. What I got instead was peace, solitary, sacred peace, and honestly, it was better. That night, I ordered dessert with dinner, a rich tiramisu and a glass of Amaro. I ate it slowly, without checking my phone, without glancing over my shoulder, for the first time in my life. I wasn't waiting for them to understand me. I wasn't hoping they'd change. I was simply living in the life I built once they stopped taking up all the space. They left Florence the next morning. I didn't see them go, but the receptionist confirmed it with a single sentence and a tight, sympathetic smile. Your family checked out earlier today. I thanked her, then walked into the small breakfast room of the hotel, sat at a table by the window, and ordered a cappuccino and eggs cooked the way I liked, soft, with herbs. No one interrupted me. No one asked for anything. And for the first time in what felt like years, I realized I had nothing to explain. That afternoon, I walked along the Arno River with a gelato in hand, and I didn't feel heavy. I didn't feel triumphant either. I just felt right, like something in the world had clicked into place, not because they'd changed, but because I had stopped waiting. When I returned to the hotel later that evening, there was a folded note waiting at the front desk. My name, again, written in that same tight cursive. I didn't open it. I didn't take it upstairs. I asked the receptionist to discard it, and she did, without hesitation. That act, quiet, unceremonious, meant more than I can explain. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't vengeful. It was just mine. The next day, I took a day trip to a small hill town outside Florence. No schedule, no must-sees, just a train, a book, and a promise to myself that I would go only where I felt pulled. I ended up on a bench overlooking vineyards and terracotta rooftops. The wind carried the scent of rosemary and old stone. I sat there for an hour and didn't speak a word. I didn't need to. That stillness said everything. When I got back to the city that night, I passed by a shop that sold handmade jewelry. In the window was a delicate gold ring, simple, almost plain, but something about it stopped me. I went inside, tried it on, and bought it. I didn't ask for a box. I slid it onto my finger and walked out wearing it. No one gave it to me. No one told me it was time. I didn't earn it by pleasing anyone. I just chose it, like I was choosing myself, again and again, without permission. 2 mornings later, I flew home. The flight was long but easy. I didn't scroll through my phone. I didn't check social media. I didn't think about what messages might be waiting. I looked out the window. I watched the light shift. I listened to silence and let it hold me like an old friend. When I stepped off the plane, there was no welcome committee, no dramatic moment, just the cool Seattle air, and my rideshare driver holding a small sign with Carpenter scrawled in Sharpie. My apartment was just as I had left it, clean, quiet, mine. On the kitchen counter sat a vase with dried lavender. I had bought it weeks earlier and forgotten it, but somehow it was still standing, a little faded, a little brittle but intact. I touched the stems and felt something settle in my chest. That's what healing looks like. Not perfect, just continued, over the next week. I returned to work. My team greeted me with cautious warmth, like they knew not to ask too much, but wanted me to feel safe. There were no grand gestures, just a welcome back note on my desk and my favorite brand of tea stocked in the kitchen. I sat down, opened my laptop, and got back to work. Not because I needed to prove anything, but because I still liked what I did. That part had never changed. Only now. I didn't let it consume me. I took breaks. I said no when I needed to. I left on time. At night. I journaled not every day, just when something shifted. One entry read, "I am not responsible for how they choose to remember the story," another said. "Some people only miss what you did for them, not who you were." And my favorite not returning is a decision too. By the second weekend home, the texts began again. First from Ethan, "We should talk." Then a longer one from my mother. "Your father is still hurt. I think you forget everything we've done for you." I read it once, deleted it. No reply. I didn't need to re-enter their performance. I wasn't interested in playing the role of the difficult daughter anymore. I wasn't difficult. I was just done. Because when people only reach out to rebuild the bridge they burned, it's not reconciliation they want. It's access. It was a Thursday afternoon when my aunt called. We weren't particularly close, but her voice carried that mix of urgency and restraint I'd come to recognize from people trying to warn you without getting involved. "I think you should see your mom's post," she said. "It's public." I didn't ask for details. I just thanked her and hung up. At first, I didn't check. I went back to my tasks, finished an email draft, cleaned out my inbox. I wasn't stalling because I was scared. I was stalling because I already knew what kind of story was being told, and I knew how it would end. That evening, after dinner, I opened the app. It was there, sitting at the top of her page, dressed in just enough vagueness to create plausible deniability. But the subtext wasn't subtle. It breaks our hearts when children we've given everything to turn their backs without warning. It read, "We never imagined we'd be treated as strangers by the person we supported most." It continued for 4 paragraphs, painting her and my father as quietly grieving parents, confused and hurt by my coldness, baffled by my sudden withdrawal. There was no mention of the hospital, no mention of the vacation, just a carefully curated performance built on omission and implication. To the casual reader, it sounded like a tragedy. To anyone who knew what had really happened, it read like fiction. I sat with it for a few minutes, not angry, not even surprised. It was a move I'd predicted long ago. When they couldn't guilt me privately, they'd do it publicly, not for me, but for sympathy, for control, for attention, and maybe for a version of redemption that required no apology. But this time, the silence didn't hold. The first comment came from Clara, my cousin, who had visited me in the hospital with a smoothie and a notebook. You left your daughter alone after a near-fatal crash to sip wine in Florence with her brother, using the ticket she paid for. Let's not pretend you were blindsided. No emojis, no fluff, just truth, dropped like a weight. More followed. A college friend commented, I remember Sabrina pulling double shifts to help her parents pay rent. She didn't turn her back. She just stopped bleeding for people who never said thank you, a former coworker wrote. Funny how the people calling her ungrateful were the same ones who left her to recover alone while they enjoyed a trip she planned. And one particularly quiet voice stood out, my old piano teacher, who wrote simply, being needed isn't the same as being loved. I hope she knows that now. I didn't respond. I didn't like any of the comments or jump in to explain myself. I didn't have to. The story was out. And for the first time in years, it wasn't being told in their voice. It was being told by those who had watched the erosion happen in real time, who had seen the way I shrunk myself, gave too much, stayed too long. By that evening, the post was deleted. No apology, no retraction, just gone, like it had never existed. But we all knew the internet doesn't forget. Screenshots had already circled back through family group chats, quiet friend threads, and shared inboxes. A truth they tried to hide had become impossible to ignore, and they couldn't delete that weekend. I went to the Saturday market near my apartment. I wandered without a list, picked up a bundle of lavender, and let myself stop at a corner cafe I'd never tried. I sat by the window, watched the rain fall in clean diagonal lines, and didn't once check my phone. There was no tension waiting, no passive-aggressive texts, no panicked voicemails. Just me, present, undistracted, whole in the quiet. Back home, I opened my journal and wrote a single sentence. They don't get to frame my silence as cruelty just because they lost access to my labor. It sat on the page like something I'd been trying to say for years, and now that it was there, I didn't need to say anything else. It took me a long time to realize that love without accountability is just manipulation dressed as family. That when people only remember their sacrifices and never acknowledge your survival, their version of love becomes something hollow, something that costs you everything while they applaud themselves for giving nothing. And maybe the cruelest part isn't that they left me behind. It's that they thought I would never stop waiting. By early June, something strange began to happen. The messages from my parents and Ethan didn't just slow, they stopped. No guilt-laced texts, no photos of flowers or recycled apologies pretending to be updates, just silence. At first, I expected it to be the calm before another storm, but it wasn't. It was a retreat, a quiet admission that they no longer had access to me, and more importantly, that I no longer needed them to understand why. The shift wasn't dramatic. It didn't arrive with some loud declaration or final confrontation. It came quietly, like fog lifting off the ground. I didn't feel victorious. I felt like I could finally breathe. The day I noticed it fully was ordinary. I walked into my apartment after work, dropped my bag on the counter, and realized nothing in me was bracing for conflict. For most of my adult life, I had lived in a constant state of preparation, always on alert, always expecting a call that required me to fix something, fund something, justify something. But now, there was nothing, just the gentle hum of the fridge, the soft creak of floorboards, and the quiet safety of a life that finally felt like mine. That weekend, I bought new bedding. New. Not because I needed it, but because I wanted to mark the shift. I chose soft linen in a pale olive tone, unapologetically my taste, not practical, not neutral, not something I would have picked back when I was still trying to be someone easy to accommodate. When I got home, I stripped the old sheets off the bed and folded them away without thinking. It felt like removing a skin I had long outgrown. Work was steady, peaceful. I wasn't trying to prove anything anymore. I didn't raise my hand for every project. I wasn't over-explaining, overextending, or anticipating everyone else's needs. I was just there, present, whole. A new hire named Tori joined our team, and one afternoon, she lingered at my desk after a meeting. "You're really calm," she said, almost confused, like unbothered. "I'm trying to figure out how you do that." I laughed softly. I stopped confusing anxiety with responsibility. "You can say no and still be good at your job." She didn't say anything, just nodded slowly, like the idea was new. And maybe it was. I wish someone had told me that 10 years ago. My birthday came a few weeks later, and for the first time in my life, I didn't wait for them to remember. I didn't refresh my inbox or check for a gift that would arrive 2 days late with a half-hearted note. Instead, I went out with friends from the office. We sat on a rooftop with paper plates and homemade cupcakes, laughing about nothing in particular. Someone brought a disposable camera and passed it around when they handed it to me. I took a photo of the sky, just soft clouds over power lines, no faces, no moment trying too hard to be important, just proof that I was alive and not waiting anymore. The next morning, a bouquet of white roses arrived at my building. No card, just a small printed tag that said, "Hope you're doing well. We miss you." I didn't have to guess. I took them upstairs, placed them in a plain jar, and set them on the table by the window. I didn't throw them away, but I didn't admire them either. They were just there, like the past, visible, but no longer shaping me. Later that evening, I opened my closet. I hadn't done a full clean-out in over a year. As I sifted through the hangers, I started to see it. So many of the clothes I kept weren't mine, not really. They were versions of me I had worn to keep the peace. The coat my mom said made me look more professional. The dress Ethan said looked respectable. The shoes my father bought for a dinner I didn't even want to attend. I pulled them out one by one, folded them neatly, and placed them in a box labeled "Donate," not because I was bitter, because they didn't fit anymore. Not my body, my boundaries, that night. I sat on the couch in old sweatpants, hair a mess, no makeup, bare feet tucked under me. I caught my reflection in the dark window, and for the first time, I didn't wince. I didn't adjust. I didn't search for anything to fix. I just stared back at myself and felt the quiet kind of pride that doesn't need witnesses, the kind that's real, because maybe the most radical thing a person can do after being erased is choose not to return, but to rebuild where no one's watching. 3 months after Florence, I went back to the same place where it all began, my favorite cafe near Pike Street, the one I used to stop by every Sunday, always with a to-go order, always on my way to solve something for someone else. That day, I stayed. I ordered a black coffee and a warm croissant and took the seat by the window, the same one where I had once answered a dozen calls, checked my brother's resume for the 3rd time, and confirmed dinner reservations I wouldn't even enjoy. But this time, there was no phone in my hand, no urgency in my chest, just quiet, honest stillness. And as I looked out at the street I used to rush through, I realized something I hadn't been able to say until that moment. I wasn't rebuilding anymore. I had rebuilt. The last few weeks had been calm in a way that felt unfamiliar, but real. No surprises, no guilt, no begging for space. I had created my own rhythm. I worked, rested, cooked meals that no one else asked for. I said yes when I meant it and no when I didn't. And slowly, the emptiness they left behind didn't feel like a wound. It felt like a clearing, a space I could finally fill with things that mattered. One morning, I received an email from Ethan. The subject line read, "If you're ready." I didn't open it. I just sat there looking at it, my finger hovering over delete, but I didn't click. Not yet, because it didn't hurt. And maybe that was more powerful than anything else, that their messages no longer triggered anything inside me. Not anger, not guilt, not even curiosity, just neutrality. That was the reward. Not revenge, not even closure, just being untouchable in the places they used to bruise. At work, I was asked to speak at a Women in Tech panel about resilience. I almost said no, not because I didn't believe in it, but because the word had been used too often to glorify survival without support. But when I walked into that room, something shifted. I looked around at the audience, young women, older women, tired women, and I realized I had something to give, not a story about pain, a story about reclaiming your life when no one apologizes, a story about building a future in the absence of applause. I told them how sometimes strength isn't rising from the ashes, it's walking away before you burn. They didn't clap loudly, they just nodded, eyes steady, and somehow that felt louder. On the anniversary of the accident, I went for a walk alone, no ritual, no grand gesture, just a long, slow loop through the park where everything was green and soft and quietly alive. I stopped by a bench, sat down, and wrote a single sentence in my journal. I am the proof that survival doesn't have to be loud to be complete. Then I closed the book, not because I was finished healing, but because I didn't need to narrate every step of it anymore. That evening, I booked another trip, not to Italy, not to prove anything, just a quiet cabin by a lake, a place where no one knew me and no one needed me. I booked it for one person, one room, one name, mine. I packed light, no pressure, no roles to play, just softness and the truth before leaving. I passed by my mailbox and found a card, no return address, inside, in small handwriting. It read, "We still love you. Come home." I folded it once, then again, and placed it in the same drawer as the others. Not out of bitterness, out of clarity, because I was already home. It just wasn't their house anymore. It was this version of me, whole, quiet, not waiting to be rescued. I've learned that sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't a confrontation. It's not even distance. It's building a life so full, so honest, that the people who once had the power to destroy you no longer recognize who you've become, because you're no longer standing where they left you. You're not smaller. You're not angrier. You're just free. And maybe the real question isn't whether they'll ever understand what they did. It's whether you'll ever need them to.